He can answer most of your questions. The first two pages in here are basically in the lines in red are the campuses proposed for consolidation. The lines in black are the campuses that will be receiving students. There is a variety of information, grade levels, accountability, square footage, enrollment, etc., all the way across. And then the projected savings is in the last column. We can look at that in a different light here. This is a lot of background information. There may be more required, but if you look at this totals, including Anderson, which is not proposed to be consolidated until 13-14, $11.5 million. The graph represents the 2011 elementary, and 2011. It is significant because in a couple cases, in one case in particular, there was a dramatic change that is caused. We can discuss, but as you can see, we started over $8,000 on the very left-hand side and start to come down. So there is a fairly significant disparity among, and particularly when you get to this page and you see that we are below $5,000 for nearly half of our elementary schools, $5,000 per student.
Well, the spread is almost double.
So from top to bottom, it is almost double. The middle school cost per student is also illustrative of an issue of what happens. There's a couple over here that the Maynard Jackson obviously has been closed, so that's not significant. Shouldn't be part of this. And then Billy Dade would be a receiving school in 13-14. So that for that.
Can you explain in layman's terms how is cost per student derived?
In generally speaking, this is the 2011 actual expenses charged to these campuses and divided by the enrollment at leveling.
So payroll?
Everything we put to the campus, utilities, teachers, principals, supplies, everything on that campus divided by the number of students. So our highest spending schools are around 8,000, while the average is around 5,000. So if we spent $3,000 a student more at every campus, you can just kind of imagine how much that would be and how good our campuses would be too.
Nothing external. It's all whatever that campus produces or is charged for.
There's no allocations.
Oh, okay.
It's direct cost. If you look at these, the schools to be consolidated, again, the 2011 data for cost per student and the percent of the average as you go down through here. There's two things I'd like to point out. One of them is Harlee. The Harlee's enrollment dropped from 320 in the 10-11 year to 198. So while this data shows them it only being 17% above, it's actually considerably higher than that right now. They're running about above nearly $7,500 on the average. And then the Roberts is the proposal on Roberts is we're operating two schools within one building. So the proposal there is to merge those students into Mount Auburn and Mata, and to put Roberts on hold until that new building comes up. So it's going to happen. The issue that we're asking the board to deal with here in this closing is to suspend Roberts and not have duplicate sets of overhead in a single building that we do right now. And again,
when you're thinking about the per student spending, you also need to think about our comparability requirements. As an example, at City Park, we can't add anything to that campus right now. If they need an extra teacher, an extra aide, if we add an aide there, a teacher there, then that magnifies all the way through the system. A couple weeks ago we tried to add, we needed a couple positions over there, we flat couldn't do it because of the impact it has on comparability. And now we got a couple bills, we got a couple versions of the comparability calculation in the And the House is looking at going straight per student expenditures. If we go straight per student expenditures, we're going to have big problems. How we maintain comparability is FTEs, teaching units. So, you know, comparability is a big issue for us, and it could get even bigger.
Yeah, the reauthorization of No Child Left Behind is all indications are there's going to be a significant tightening of the comparability, which is going to make it more and more difficult to provide equal services across the district for small campuses of any size. I mean, of any sort, secondary or elementary. These are the projected savings coming across, net savings actually, because some of the personnel at these campuses will be absorbed in the receiving campuses, or the positions will be. Again, to put it into perspective, the average of all schools at elementary is $49.85, and at middle school is $5,300. The average of the schools to be consolidated, based on 2011 data. This is, now again, it's gotten even worse in 11-12. Is you know, is nearly 36% and 39% more than the average. And when you start looking at a couple of the outliers, it's fairly significant. The net reduction of FTEs as a result of the consolidation is described here. As you can see, 65 teachers, the largest being the support staff of nearly 80 folks. And then you've got a number of other Chapter 21 people that are principals, counselors, librarians, and nurses who would be reduced in the consolidation. Salaries produce 79% of the $11.5 million savings. Second is contracted services, which is primarily utilities. The others are there, but they're relatively small.
We're not going to say 100% of our utilities.
We use some algorithms on that. We didn't take all of it out, but we would reduce them fairly significantly. The next steps, there is a required district public hearing. The current plan is to have 5, although it could go up or down depending upon what the feedback is from the board. In meetings in the community to discuss specific schools. These meetings are being scheduled. We anticipate them occurring between January 17th all the way through the January 26th board meeting, and we have not yet determined the exact time or place for the meetings.
Meetings generally are going to be in one of these campuses, though, or in these campuses.
Yeah. I recommend you have one to the campuses.
Yeah, I would recommend a full complement as well. So if you got 9 schools being closed, is there a reason we're doing less than 9 meetings, just other than our own convenience?
For instance, in Trustee Nuttall's era, we were combining the schools and possibly going to Madison and or maybe the Martin Luther King Center was a recommendation to combine all, but we can look at it either way.
So can I make a suggestion? I mean, one thing that we did a few years ago that I think was very effective, we did at Cary. When Cary took in, there were a couple schools that got moved from elementary schools that got moved from the
Sudie Williams,
Sudie Williams and Overnight Night got moved over. We actually had the hearing at Cary, and it was kind of a welcome to Cary kind of meeting, and the other students were involved and said, these are all the services that you can get here at the school. This is the kind of stuff that we do at Cary, and the pride and kind of the receiving, welcoming of the schools. I mean, it may be a better idea to, you know, show the parents, you know, the place where they're going to go, potentially.
So you're saying instead of having the meeting at the proposed closing schools, have the meetings at the receiving schools.
Have the receiving schools tell them, look, this is the PTA we have, these are the programs that we have here, this is our mascot, this is, you know, it was kind of part of the, you know, welcome to Cary, and that was very effective. I mean, I thought that the meeting went, you know, and it was Eddie Conger had just taken over at TJ, and you know, that was kind of his brainchild, and man, it was, you know, it really went well. It's very hard for for the parents to show up to this new school and say, well, your school's ugly. I mean, they're not. You know, I mean, these are good folks at those schools, and just an idea of a different way of approaching it.
Remind us on how you selected.
sorry.
Remind us how you selected these 11 schools.
Well, the elementary schools were selected at basically 250, actually 251 and below was the cutoff.
So you didn't look at any campuses that were above that other than Roberts, which was...
Well, yeah, Roberts is a different animal. But we looked at some, but that was the cutoff. I mean, we realizing that this is a difficult process. We wanted to do something. We'll cut it off at a level that was achievable.
Excuse me again.
Or hopefully achievable.
The schools that were, the elementary schools that had 250 below students, that's just a follow-up. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Did you repeat that, 250 or 250 below? 251
and below. We looked at those campuses. And the proposed, that's where we ended up drawing the line. We looked at a number of others, but we ended up drawing the line at that point.
Trustee Blackburn, did you have more comments? I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, I have some more arguments, but we'll see.
Okay, Trustee Bingham.
I just wanted to get some feedback from Dr. Newsom on the proposed hearings. Do you think it would, in your estimation, what would work better, to have parent hearings at the school that's being closed or go to the receiving school? What's your input on that?
When we moved the 6th graders from Gonzales to Thompson, we had the parent meeting at Thompson so they could see the school. We did the same thing when we moved those 6th graders from Thompson to William Anderson. We had the parent meeting there. The faculty was there along with the principal. They did a tour of the school. Essentially what Mr. Flores said in terms of welcoming. I think it could work either way, but I think the notion that this is where your kids are going to be is probably the better way to do it.
I like the idea of having the faculty, the receiving, well, of course it won't necessarily, both faculties need to be there, I guess, or all, but I like the idea of them going to the receiving school building.
Taking a tour. It was really nice because they did
see what it looks
like, and then they got to meet the personnel, the office, everybody was there, the office manager, the nurse. We just made it so that they would feel at home, essentially is what we wanted to do.
The only thing that would be different here is that the school that they are received in, that might not be the staff that they're going to.
No, but the staff could be there to show them the school, and so.
We've got several going into multiple schools, though.
So they would go to the school they're being.
So we know boundaries, and we'd be able to communicate that to the parents.
Yeah, we've come up with a draft boundary proposal, so okay. I think we're in pretty good shape.
If we do this, that, I don't know, I'm trying to think of what way would be most beneficial to the parents and the children.
Trustees, second round of questions.
This is my first.
Ms. Ranger, you first.
Yes, and I was going to point out that there are multiple, more than one, so you would have the patterns for the students prior to those meetings. Then that would be communicated. Let me just understand again on the policy that was proposed. With the consolidation, it's only the staff at the school that is being closed that will go into excess. Is that what is happening, or is there consideration to with both of them there will
Everybody.
be, or is it both schools?
Well, our existing policy, and we're moving from one existing policy to another, right?
What is being proposed? That's what I'm asking.
The proposal in DK Local is that the Chapter 21 employees of the schools that are being consolidated, the sending school, that those be then considered excess employees.
Only the closed campuses.
But, you know, one of the things that we will do is have job fairs. There are going to be vacancies, and principals will have an opportunity to interview those teachers just like they did this past year.
Like when 22 kids or 24 kids move over, one teacher.
There will be vacancies.
Right.
And I would just add that the teachers, these are some of our top performing schools, which means you've got your top performing staffs on these campuses, and I can see that principals will be clamoring after the great majority of these teachers.
Some of them may not be at the level of, for this year, may not have the acceptable or recognized status. And so for those schools, unless I'm mistaken that everyone on here is at Citrus, but I do know that at least one is not, and so that would be a challenge for them if they're only looking at that, even though the school does very well, and it may have been a few students, as we know that can happen, that will prevent a school from getting acceptable status as opposed to the whole school's
I think the only school
failing.
that I can recall, and correct me, is Fraser, and you know, Fraser's had a very, very strong history of excellence. It just had a kind of a little downturn.
Halsey is working to get to that point. Halsey Middle School.
Middle school.
That
I
is
was looking at
also
elementary.
There. Also. So,
Can I ask a point of information on that? In your opinion, do principals look at the rating of the school that this teacher came from, or are they looking more at the individual teacher themselves?
And they look at both the CEIs and the rating of the school, because it all plays the same role. But CEIs will be one of the primary, and of the principal recommendation too.
and that can be a problem, especially for those who are focusing really on that school and those and what may have happened with the teacher's CEI. But that was just an aside. I'm not in favor of the generally for this year. I think that we ought to take the opportunity to look at this for another year, and I know we're looking at funds, but all of this is a matter of making a decision. This came to us. There's a lot to be considered. Many of these schools are quite small, but of course there's a lot to be said, especially in the educational reform movement for small schools. Smaller schools have been and are being touted and being proposed and being promoted as being very successful schools. And many of these schools, as was pointed out, are high-performing schools. And so it's not a matter of them doing poorly. It was an arbitrary decision. Let's look at this number and go below that. And it's not a matter of money either, because we must make, as a board, the decision as to how we use the funds. I just saw that in the budget, the 13 million, what's that? 13,308,000, the budgeted revenue over expenditures, et cetera. So there's a lot to be considered, a lot to be thought about here. It's just a matter of where our values are and what we want to do now and how we want to proceed and how closely we want to look at this proposal. So I'm not ready or convinced that this is what we ought to do at this point.
Have we done a study, or do we know why? Or is there any way we can get these schools that are above that threshold that we want to get to in cost per student down? I mean, is there a way to get City Park down from 8,000 to 5,000 per student?
No. I mean, it's when you staff it with the overhead personnel to keep the doors open, and you pay utilities and all of the other stuff in there. It's just you just can't afford to do it.
Some schools could work out, because you have some of those schools on the list. If you change the attendance boundary lines, then you get more students into that building. It may not necessarily add that many more staff, if it at all.
Staffing efficiency is crucial. I mean, that's what the bulk of the savings in here is. You are providing that, and there's no question if a school's got capacity, then it's an issue of which one do you close. You can't just change the boundary lines and not reduce square footage and make this work.
The essence of this, we're closing these schools to save money. No other reason. Is that correct?
That's the primary, yes.
That's not entirely, and that's the driving force, but we're still going to have to deal with comparability. So the further these schools are out, and like it creates issues. I mean, what did we try to add at City Park a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, we tried to add 2 positions at City Park. We tried to add, I'm trying to think of the other school. It was 3 schools that we were trying to add positions to, and we simply could not, and they needed the positions.
I'm just simply saying, if you add more students to that campus,
If you add more to that campus, you're reducing the numbers at another campus.
And
it's still, yeah.
You can get
yeah,
your.
It is not an easy decision, no question about that. But I would offer also that when moving, consolidating schools from very, very small ones that we're looking at to medium-sized ones, there are more services that kids can get. Right now, we're looking at a 0.5 tag teacher, 0.5 counselor, 0.5 this, 0.5 that, music teacher, etc. And so I don't think that we are offering our students the full range of services that we could be offering them otherwise.
We also.
But the more kids you get in the school, the cost per student goes down. That's it. I mean, if you
there are ways to play with these things.
The more kids you get in the school, the cost per student will go down.
Yeah.
But the question is when you move them over, you're also impacting the enrollment in other schools.
So, to continue again with Trustee Cowan's point, what is likely going to happen when these Title I rules get tightened at the federal level is we're going to have sort of massive surgery on our attendance zones to move kids around in order to
We won't be able
balance
to do it with the attendance zones only. We're going to have to close some more schools. You will not be able to do it. I mean, you only have a finite number of kids, and you got X number of square feet, and it's square footage is too high.
If you know, right now only the House has passed it right. The Senate has not passed it.
I mean, it's the reauthorization bill. Everybody should watch that for No Child Left Behind, and watch it. And comparability is a major piece of it. It's significant. There's some other things they're doing, but that's the thing that's likely to impact us the greatest, because it will make it impossible to provide a full educational services in these smaller campuses.
Can you explain? I read it, but can you explain what the federal?
I was going to let Trustee Cowan
go ahead.
At the federal, when they talk about at the federal, what they're trying to do at the Fed to align with the state on that. What was?
Well, I'm not sure I understand that either.
Okay, I couldn't.
Well, let me get some people to look at that, and maybe we can talk about it at a later meeting.
I'll send you over what I read to that kind of.
I mean, as near as I can tell, the state of Texas is not cooperating with anybody.
No,
so
that's what.
So taking, for example, Bonham from pre-K to 3 to pre-K to 5, that's not going to solve our issue. Is that what you're basically?
You got to move the kids from somewhere.
it will cause it will make, I mean, you could maybe do that and consolidate Milam into it.
Get those parents calling.
Well, and you have the comparability problem in Robert E. Lee. So I mean, what you're doing is you're solving the problem with probably 3 schools at once.
I would just between now and whenever we need to decide, I think you need to give us a little bit stronger budgetary ramifications for if this doesn't pass, what we're really going to have to do.
I mean, I think
we're talking $11-12 million.
I think the issue is 171 teachers. That's what this equates to.
That's what it is.
It doesn't have to get any more sophisticated than that.
That's not on the expenditure side. I mean, I don't see anywhere else on the expenditure side. You got the revenue side hanging out there, but then on the expenditure side, you're not going to get a whole lot of money anywhere else unless you want to go to get that.
So it's either this or class size, is what you're saying.
Custodial contract.
Yeah.
I mean, that's hanging out there. That's a big hunk too. So the only big hunks we got left that we know of at this particular point is a custodial contract, how we deliver those services, and class size at the secondary, or we could probably go up a little bit more at the elementary, but I'm not real sure we want to try that.
I mean, all indications are that we're not going to get any favors from the next biennium either. That we're going to be at best, we're going to hold on to what we have, and probably will lose some.
You have to remember that, although we're trying to get through this year, and we got through the last year, we're trying to get through this budget cycle here. At some point in time, all these districts around us, or a lot of them, are going to start increasing teacher salaries, and we're going to have to do the same, or we're going to start losing teachers. As soon as they start doing it, and we don't, we're going to start losing teachers. So all that stuff you got to save some of these.
Sound like in order to do that means we have to close some more schools in order to increase salaries.
But you still got those 2 shots for the the homestead exemption and the rebate shift.
We have more bond needs,
Absolutely.
and we might not be able to get the next bond because we're closing schools.
Because we raised taxes.
That too.
It's tough.
yeah.
Trustee Flores?
So I want to go back to the students, and think in terms of the research on small learning communities and smaller schools. But when they're talking about smaller schools, they're talking 600 to 800. They're not talking these boutique micro schools. The research is actually between 600 and 800. That's where the research is on the effectiveness. And what we're doing by doing this is putting them into that environment. I mean, my concern is we have a lot of these half-time teachers, tag teachers, because this happens in Board District 1, where we have these little 350, 400 student schools. And you have because they only get half an allocation. But that half an allocation gets to the one location, does their bit with their teachers, then has to get in the, put all their stuff down, go to a different school, and show up, clock themselves in, do all the stuff that they have to do, get set up, and it is not very efficient. And they kind of have their feet in different places versus having them all in one school where that tag teacher knows, I am the full-time teacher of this school. I'm fully invested in this school. I know all the kids. I'm not running around all over town going to this school and this school and this school. I am here. And so from that perspective, from a student perspective, I think they will receive better services by having full-time music teachers, full-time art teachers that are at that one campus and not running around all over town, basically on our nickel, but out, not in front of kids. But I think that as painful as these are, and there is nothing that you can do, I think, that's worse than this. I mean, Board District 1 went through this about 20 years ago when, 5 elementary schools down the middle of the district had been closed because there were no kids there.
They have since reopened.
And every single last one of them has since reopened
because of another population shift.
Right, because of a population shift. So putting schools in mothballs from an efficiency point of view makes a lot of sense. But I think also as importantly, from the point of view of the services that we can provide and focus and deliver to children at those campuses.
I agree.
As far as the research and the data goes, that wouldn't be true for Dallas ISD because all of these are very small schools and they are succeeding.
Most of those
very successful.
Yeah, and most of those are only testing one grade too. Your pre-K3 schools only testing one grade. I mean, we just need to remember that. We also need to look at the ITPS data, which is pretty comparable on those campuses to other campuses. It's only when we get to the grade 3 that we see a significant difference.
Well, if we are measuring success by the labels here, I see that all of them are successful, and I see that they are, that the enrollment is very low, and that was the criterion on which it was based, that they would be the ones recommended for closing.
We also have some of the strongest principals that we have.
Strongest principals
who would do well with larger campuses as well.
I'm sure they will, but when we talk about consolidation, we don't know whether those principals will get a campus because we're talking about the principal of the receiving school being there, and hopefully they will, but we will have fewer schools.
Yeah, the policy only speaks to those teachers. The superintendent still has the right to do placement of principals.
Certainly.
That has not been taken away.
No, it has not been taken away, but there are still schools that have principals now, and we don't know what will happen. So there are many factors, many contingencies, many questions that still need to be answered, asked and answered. I was wondering if anyone spoke with the schools. Has there been any conversation with the persons in the schools to discuss how they believe money can either be saved on their campuses when we're talking about the expense of running the campus? It may be small, but somebody just said every penny, every nickel helps, because I think that 11 million can certainly, in $1 billion budget, can be found. But have there been any conversations with the schools about these proposed closings?
In terms of money savings, no.
Well, period, about the closing and any responses from that.
Well,
I've had meetings since last March with community members and parents. I've been meeting with them since March of 2010, talking about repurposing schools meeting and with ideas, and administration is looking at H.S. Thompson, trying to repurpose it. And so we've been meeting. We had a community meeting at H.S. Thompson last year where a lot of parents came out and community members, and then been having small group meetings. We've even went to had a meeting with the mayor to talk about we've been losing 9% every year in South Dallas, about how we're going to bring affordable housing back to South Dallas, and economics and education go hand in hand. So we've been talking. Charles Friday met with a community group here. We brought them down, a pastor and some other people, to talk about it, along with Keisha, about repurposing Pearl C. So we've been having a lot of meetings trying to figure out ways that we can help the school and keep them open.
I think your question was about faculty.
Right, it was about
and yes, there was a
faculty
faculty
and
meeting.
staff
It
in the
was a meeting
schools.
held on each campus with a meeting with the principals first, and then a meeting on each campus with the faculties to give notice that there was consideration of their schools being presented for consolidation, given the size, etc. So yes, there was a meeting on each campus. Was there a question raised? How do you think you could save money to avoid this? And the answer to that is no.
Okay, and that's what, as we get input from everybody and as we're gathering, I'm wondering, because I believe if given the choice, although it may not be greatly significant, but given the choice of, can you give us any suggestions, any recommendations as to how we may lower the expenditures of this school to avoid closing? They might be quite creative. Just trying to think of ways to save money any way we can as we look at just this one shot at getting 10 point, what was it, 10 point what million?
10.25 million.
10.25 million.
We do
And
have
11.5
we do have a
total.
principals budget group formed, and we've been meeting since when, Jim?
Started in September.
Been working with a group of about 18 principals since September, looking to identify other cuts that we can make and other efficiencies that we can gain. And to date, we haven't come up with any really big dollars.
And as I said, I'm thinking of that
And we are
group,
too.
that school. Oh, I know you are. We're getting together within that school and with the parents and the community, coming up with, all right, here's what we can do to give another year for everybody to look at and settle in on, okay, this is really what we need to do and why, as opposed to right now. Because even back in September, as you started meeting with them, I'm not sure, because we got this recommendation in December, I believe, and I'm not sure that it was presented to them that their school might be closed. Was it in September?
When was it done, Charles? I don't remember.
We had the school usage committee in November. And that's when the list was initially released.
And the faculty meetings were held in November, shortly after the list was.
To inform them.
To inform them, yes.
Other trustees' questions, or Ms. Ranger, are you finished? Trustees, other questions on the consolidation? Trustee Blackburn? So that, there is a, thank you very much. So there are other items on the business services agenda, but why don't we go back to education, then we'll finish up kind of in order.
If that is on the agenda for February, I'd like for that item to be pulled for a separate vote.
I'm sorry.
The item that relates to school consolidation.
Yeah, that's DA3.
If that is